Star Wars 7x7 episode 1894. Today, the mostly non-spoiler review, and if there is anything spoilery, it'll be real mild, for Black Spire, the new novel by Delilah Dawson. Let's go. Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7x7. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode, and let's kick things off with 7 fast facts about Black Spire, or I guess the official title would be Star Wars: Galaxy's Edge: Black Spire. And you know, even though it is a Galaxy's Edge novel, there is information, I guess, that sort of fills in the gaps between The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, because it does take place in that time period, and we'll talk about the timeline. But the first fast fact has to deal with just the plot itself, as a quick refresher. So Vi Moradi, who was the hero of the novel Phasma by Delilah Dawson that came out during the Journey to the Last Jedi publishing initiative, she's been tasked by Leia Organa with building up a new resistance base, another bolt hole where they can hide, especially considering how bad things are getting with the First Order. Vi is a rebel spy, or a resistance spy, I should say, and so this is a little bit different from her normal expertise, basically. And, you know, part of the charms of the novel involve seeing her operate in a different way and do things that are, you know, sometimes out of her comfort zone, and figuring out how to manage that. And also the whole experience of trusting Leia and knowing that she assigned Vi this particular mission, knowing that Leia is, you know, pretty smart cookie and must have done it for a reason. So, you know, Vi having to find her own ability to trust herself and her capabilities in this situation is stuff that makes for a very good novel. And a second fast fact about the novel is that it's essentially operating as a bit of a tour guide for Galaxy's Edge and Black Spire Outpost. You have the possibility for it becoming more of a travelogue situation, or more of a, oh, how shall I put it? Just something that feels artificial. I'll leave it at that. And thankfully, there's a very breezy way that it's all handled, and so kudos to Delilah Dawson for introducing us to Black Spire Outpost in a way that doesn't feel ham-handed or, you know, overly awkward. Now, as far as the timeline goes, this is your third fast fact, and this is probably where it gets the most spoilery, if you will, and yet it's not going to be too spoilery, but here you go. The novel excerpt that we got before the novel was released, where Leia is assigning Vi this mission, and she's about to go off to Takodana to gather some valuable intel, right? In other words, that meeting was taking place during the same time as The Force Awakens. Well, it turns out that the events of the novel Black Spire don't actually happen concurrent with The Force Awakens. They take place after both of The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, and instead take place about 4 months after those two movies. And so if that graphic from D23 is to be believed, then it's about 8 months prior to the events of The Rise of Skywalker, or at least the majority of the novel. There is an epilogue that takes place a little bit later that also positions the novel as definitively taking place before the day that exists at Galaxy's Edge in Walt Disney World and Disneyland. Now, let's talk about another strong suit of the book, and this is another fast fact for you, our fourth one, and that has to do with the characters in the novel. So, as opposed to the novel Phasma being sort of Mad Max in space, the novel Black Spire was described by Delilah Dawson as more like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, but in space, or set in Star Wars. And yeah, it doesn't necessarily come off for me in that particular way, but, you know, that could be me. I do watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine and have enjoyed the heck out of it. I don't feel like that quite matches the experience that I had with Black Spire. However, I will say that because of the fact that Vi's mission is to gather up potential recruits for the Resistance and build this base, that she ends up building a group of people who definitely have wildly different personalities and their own particular sets of skills, to borrow from another franchise. And they are well-drawn characters. And I think probably one of the things that I appreciated most about the novel was that we actually got to dig into the backstories of these characters and really feel something visceral about their motivations and emotions and what has brought them into the Resistance fold. And of course, Vi Moradi herself, I think, is a fantastic character, and I was very glad to be able to have another experience of her in this novel. Now, your fifth fast fact has to do with the villains and the general drama and conflict of the situation. So Wolfgar Kath is our big First Order baddie in this situation, and it turns out that he has a past connection to both Vi Moradi and the former Captain Cardinal, now Archex. He's going by his given name at this point. And one of the very strong things about the novel Phasma was how Delilah Dawson was able to not only, split two stories. It is basically two stories. It's the story of Phasma and how she got off planet, and also the story of Vi getting captured and tortured by Cardinal and how she ultimately turns him and helps him escape. So that kind of dynamic is done very well by Delilah Dawson, and it's on display here again. Now, the sixth fast fact, and I'm trying to walk a line on this one because I don't necessarily want to spoil it for you, and I'll dig into it more on the spoiler episodes of the show. And yet, my experience of the lion's share of the novel was colored by a couple of Vi Moradi's initial interactions on planet, on Batuu, and a couple of choices that she makes specifically. And the reason why I have some difficulty and some challenges with it is because they seem completely out of character from the character that I enjoyed in the novel Phasma and that I continue to enjoy throughout the novel. But her initial actions while on Batuu really seem out of character for her, and it seems like the decisions that were made for her character were meant to accelerate the plot, if you will. In other words, we know the First Order is going to arrive on Batuu. That's been part of the marketing of the book. And the reason why they know that they need to be on Batuu is because of things that Vi Moradi does, and they just seem really out of character for how I experienced the character in the rest of the novel and in the previous novel as well. So, and I know I'm being a little vague about it, but again, we'll dig into it further on the spoiler episodes later this week. I'm going to take a quick break, and then I'm going to wrap up the review of Black Spire after the break. Stay tuned. This episode is brought to you by Constant Contact, the premier email marketing solution for small businesses and organizations. I've used their service since 2003, and over the past decade and a half, I've watched them evolve, make the product simpler, more powerful, easy to use, and do everything that they can to help train people to use the product more effectively and for it to work with other forms of marketing like social media, for example. So check out sw7x7.com/email to learn more about Constant Contact and start a free trial. Once again, that is sw7x7.com/email for a free trial. Welcome back. So, wrapping up the review of Star Wars: Galaxy's Edge: Black Spire by Delilah Dawson. First of all, the character of Vi Moradi is really a wonderful creation and is, the driving center of this novel, and the people that she gathers around her in this novel are also very fun characters, and her interactions with Archex are really awesome. And, that was one of the most dynamic things about Phasma, and because of the fact that the adventure this time has to expand to include other parties, you lose a little bit of that, but it's still definitely satisfying and worthwhile. I will say that, if I had to compare them, I definitely enjoyed Phasma better than I liked Black Spire, but they are two different novels. They are really kind of apples and oranges. One of the things that they have in common is the fact that Delilah Dawson is great with character and great with character interaction and can definitely keep the pages turning once the plot gets going, and so Yeah, there is definitely a lot to recommend Black Spire to you, but yeah, it didn't quite live up to what I was hoping for, at least from my experience with Vi and Phasma previously. But there you go. We'll dig deeper into the details and get into spoilery territory in the next couple of episodes. But for now, that is going to do it for this episode of the show. Thank you so much for joining me for it, as always. And may the Force be with you, wherever in the world you may be.
This podcast is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox. It is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other related Star Wars items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2019 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.